have a PlayStation.
And I have a PlayStation.
And I have a PlayStation.
And I have a PC. But what is the best way to play PlayStation?
Before we get into the rest of the video, take this as your opportunity to subscribe. It's the right thing to do. You know you want to do it. It helps me out a bunch. And if you don't, it's just going to rain on your birthday. Hello everybody, how are you doing? It's time for yet another PlayStation 1 video, yet another one. I've done several modding videos for the PlayStation 1, and I thought it would be a good time now to actually have a look at, like, what is the best route, like, now. If you were wanting to play PlayStation 1 games in 2025, realistically, what is the best way to do it? So, I thought, seeing as I have a plethora of different ways to play them, it would be a fun idea to kind of go through and show you all the pros and the cons and the upsies and the downsies. So that's what we're going to do. First contender is an original PlayStation 1 running off discs. This hasn't been modded. This is exactly as it left the factory. So we will get a good idea of what the native resolution and what the games actually look like and what it is like to try and play games from disc in 2025. Second up, we have an original PlayStation that's been modded to high heaven. This has an X station in there with a 1TB SD card and pretty much the entirety of the US library on there. And it also has a RetroGem HDMI mod, which is a solder mod where it solders directly onto the GPU, cutting out the digital to analog converter and getting you the best, crispest, cleanest signal you could possibly get out of a PlayStation 1. So that's what we've got for native hardware. But obviously when you're using the X station, you have to have all of the games as some form of ISO file, which you presumably got perfectly legally. Probably a backup from all of the original copies that you owned back in the day or even now. But anyway, so you've got all of those ISO files. Why not go down the emulation route? So starting with emulation, we have the PlayStation 1 Classic. Now, this was not hugely popular when it came out for various different reasons, but it is very simple to use. It's plug and play, and it comes with 20 games on there of dubious quality. Some are very good, but anyway, it comes with 20 games out of the box. But as I've shown in my previous video, it's not particularly difficult to mod. And then you can put all the games you want on it. You can run RetroArch, which is going to give you much better rendering, and yeah, it basically kind of solves all the problems of this just as it is. So we will have two sections for this. We will have the stock, and then we'll also have the RetroArch mod. So finally, for emulation, you've probably got all of those ISOs stored on a PC, so why not just use Duckstation and just render them on the PC? There's a long list of caveats to go through, but first of all, let's talk about the games we're going to use for the comparison. As I was wanting to do a comparison with native hardware and the PlayStation Classic, I was kind of stuck to using games that I both had a physical copy of and were also on the PlayStation Classic. So they will be
Battle Arena Toshinden, Cool Borders 2, Destruction Derby, Metal Gear Solid, Ubisoft's Rayman, so we've got a 2D title in there as well, Tekken 3, and Wipeout 2097.
Now, I know Wipeout 2097 wasn't on the original PlayStation Classic, but I will explain that when we get to it. Caveats, 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 caviar in hats. Obviously, there are loads and loads of other ways to play PlayStation 1 games. I wasn't going to go through every single possible iteration, mostly because I would have had to have bought a load more consoles, and it would have been... So I think the video is going to be long enough. Okay, I mean, even just off the top of my head, here's a list of other things you can play PlayStation 1 games on. So there are other ways, but I think we have a good spread here. Capturing the PlayStation 1 is a little bit tricky because it's an analog console and we're trying to record in digital. So what I've used, it had a RGB SCART cable coming out the back, which is the best possible quality cable that you can get for that. And when it's hooked up to a CRT telly, it looks amazing. Unfortunately, I do not have a really, really good upscaler. Now, you can get super good upscalers like the RetroTink 5X or the 4K, which make an amazing job of upscaling them to sort of HD rendered quality, which is fine, but they are really expensive. I wasn't going to buy one just for this video when I have lots and lots of other ways of playing the PlayStation 1. That was the whole point in modding the PlayStation 1, because the signal you get out of a HDMI modded PlayStation is far better than you get out of an upscaler. So I just ended up using a 40 quid upscaler, which does not do the best job, if I'm honest with you. And that's running through into a mirror box capture card, which is perfectly adequate. That does a really good job at 1080p. But the upscaler's not great. So first of all, it insists on doing it as widescreen and stretching it. I will try to fix that in the edit, but I don't know how well that's going to turn out, so I might just leave the footage as is. And yeah, so it's not an indicative view of what the PlayStation 1 looks like. When it is on a CRT telly, it looks amazing. But then that means you've got to have a big CRT telly. So just take the original PlayStation 1 footage with a grain of salt. And with that, I think we're about ready to get into the comparisons.
First up, to get as a baseline, we're going to be playing Battle Arena Toshinden directly from disc, and immediately we were confronted with our first problem, over and above the fact the game's a little bit shit, and that's a major rendering issue with the computer opponent. Now this did sort itself out after a restart, but you do have to bear in mind that these discs are over 20 years old at this point, so there is going to be some issues along the way. And to be honest, I'd kind of forgotten that this kind of thing did happen back in the day as well, even when they were brand new. As you can see, that the image is quite grainy, and there is quite a bit of artifacting going on, and also some weird halos. Now I don't know how much of that is due to the poor quality of the upscaler, and I wonder how much of that would or wouldn't have been visible when it was being run on a CRT telly. Next up from disc, we have Cool Borders 2, and again we've got an awful lot of dithering going on, and it's quite a noisy image that you can see, which makes certain things fairly difficult to make out. Just look how long it takes from when the checkpoint sign becomes visible to when it actually is readable.
The checkpoint is coming up! You better hurry! We did it! Go, go, go! It's too early to go to sleep!
Destruction Derby now from stock hardware, and as you can see it suffers quite a lot from dithering, particularly on the track and around the smoke effect. You'll see there's an awful lot of jaggies going on with the A-pillar for the vehicle that you drive in. All in all, it's not a bad image, but it's far from the best. The Desk Ferret himself is up next with Metal Gear Solid, and as you can see there is so much dithering in this image. On a CRT telly this would have looked really good, and that would have helped blend all of these squares and all of these objects into a nice cohesive image, but now that we have it on a digital screen it really doesn't do it any favours. Rayman next, and the age of the discs rears its ugly head again, and we ended up with some really awful rendering issues to begin with. Just like with Battle Arena Toshinden though, a restart and a bit of a clean on the disc, and that kind of sorted itself out. But even so, once we got into game, it really did look pretty terrible. I think this is probably just a case of the cheap upscaler doing the PlayStation dirty, to be honest. But in motion, this looks really appalling. It kind of, everything blurs together, and it all kinds of looks a little bit oil painting-y rather than like nice, clean, crisp image. So we won't hang around here because I think this is probably more to do with the cheap upscaler than anything. On to Tekken 3, and as you can see, the colour is there. It's a nice, bright and vibrant image, but by God, all of those colours is bleeding into one kind of gaudy, awful, smudgy mess in the background. And then in some of the other stages, which are a little darker, we're getting some sort of weird artifacting and some vertical striping. Again, I'm not sure how much of that is down to the NAF upscaler or how much of that is down to the original image, but either way, it's still not the best representation of what Tekken looks like. It does look an awful lot better on a CRT, as I've said already, but yeah, putting this onto a HD screen using the cheap upscaler is really not a good option. And finally we got Wipeout 2097, and ye gods, I was not going to lie to you, I was having actually quite a bit of difficulties discerning what was going on in this, and I was really struggling to play this game. I don't remember it being this bad when it was on a TV, but thinking about it back on a CRT telly, it would have only been about 14 inches across, and it would have been like, you know, a lot tighter and a lot smoothed out, so maybe it looked a lot better and made a lot more sense back in the day. But yeah, I was really struggling with this one. Now we've gone through all of the games played off a disc, let's crystallise our thoughts with a lovely little graph. And there we go, lovely. So a second-hand PlayStation 1's going to set you back 30 to 40 quid, so they're relatively cheap to pick up and they are very readily available. Then on top of that you've got the Upscaler, and that's very much a case of the more you spend the better it's going to be. I used the 40 quid cheaper Upscaler and the results were not the best, and with the best results coming from the RetroTink 4K, which is about 750 quid in the UK. I have however heard people say that they've got very good results from the RetroScaler 2X, which is just under £80, or even the RetroTink 2K, which is about 150 quid. There will be affiliate links down below. And games are a bit of a mixed bag. I mean, if you're lucky and the games you want to play are cheap, well, they're cheap and you can pick them up for as little as a £5 or a £10. But if you're wanting to play, say for instance, Ghost in the Shell, you're going to be looking at spending somewhere in the region of about 150 quid or something like that. And God forbid you want to play Castlevania Symphony of the Night. As far as the end result goes, basically the more money you spend, the better the results are going to be that you get. If you're willing to throw a 750 quid Upscaler on there and you've got no problems with spending multiple hundreds of pounds to play some of the best titles on the system, then you can get some very good results out of a stock PlayStation. As far as a faff is concerned, this is actually quite the faff. Even once you've got the Upscaler plugged in and you've got it all hooked up to a decent telly, there is always the problem that potentially the disc you've just spent hundreds of pounds on doesn't work. Some of the discs that I had were completely immaculate. There was no sign of any damage on them whatsoever, or even any signs of disc rot, and you saw that we did still have the occasional rendering issue, so this is just a natural byproduct of trying to run a game off a disc that's 20 odd years old. On to the Retro Gem. I am using the Retro Gem Shiny Edition, set at 1440p, but unfortunately the recording's only at 1080p. As you can see, the X-Station interface is very clear, but it does kind of have a bit of a DOS kind of feel about it. One of the most notable improvements, particularly when comparing the footage that I was able to achieve, was in Tekken 3. So this is the baseline from when it was being run off disc, and changing over to the Retro Gem in 3, 2, 1. As you can tell, the image is an awful lot sharper and all of the edges are a lot sharper, whereas previously it kind of looked a little bit like a watercolour, and there was an awful lot of noise within the shading as well. Cool borders too now, and it's even more obvious just how much of an improvement the Retro Gem is on the right. As you can see, the snow on the right is an awful lot less granular and is kind of snow coloured rather than the kind of milky yellowy colour that the original PlayStation created, and just generally all in all it's a much sharper image.
And Revolver Ocelot, specialist in interrogation and a formidable gunfighter.
When we compare this intro FMV from Metal Gear Solid, on the left you can see it's a much grainier image with an awful lot more noise in there, and on the right you can see there's an awful lot less noise and all of the edges are much more defined. Some may say that the stock image off disc actually kind of has more atmosphere, and some of that is kind of maybe stripped away a little bit with the Retro Gem. But I think, to be honest, we are losing a little bit in the recording here, and when you compare them live on a full screen, the Retro Gem does look an awful lot better. I think the capture card I'm using is not particularly the best, and also with it being recorded in 1080p in OBS, that's also kind of doing a little bit of heavy lifting as well. The 2D sprite work on Rayman really does show up the differences, and actually quite a bit more than I was expecting. From original hardware off the disc and through a cheap upscaler on a high-def television, this looks absolutely awful. It looks like a really kind of mushy, smudgy, oily kind of thing going on. It just looks horrible. Switching over to the Retro Gem, and it becomes immediately clear that all of the edges are really crisp and sharp and all of the pixels are individually defined, and it just looks a million times better. I think this is probably the best demonstration out of the footage that I've captured that really does show the difference between the Retro Gem and playing it directly from a disc or a cheap upscaler. That improvement didn't necessarily come off quite as obvious in Battle Arena Toshinden and in Wipeout or even in Destruction Derby, to be honest, and I think that is definitely more to do with my capture software than anything else. When you compare them actually on a large TV, they do look night and day different, and there is a significant improvement, but unfortunately my capture equipment hasn't really done the retro gem justice, to be honest here. So on to the results for the retro gem. The cost of a stock PlayStation is going to cost you around about 40 quid, exactly the same as it was on the previous one, but the retro gem costs around about £120 here in the UK, and the X-Station is also around about £100. Then on top of that, you've kind of got to fit them as well. If you can do that, obviously you can do that for free, but if you have to pay someone to do it, you could be adding on maybe an extra £100 probably to get that fitted. Then on top of that, you've got the cost of a memory card to go in the X-Station, which can be as little or as much as you want, depending on how many games you want to get on there. All in all, the results are pretty good for the retro gem. I mean, when you get it up on a big screen, it does look an awful lot better than the stock PlayStation, but it doesn't have any anti-aliasing or anything like that, so it just becomes like a very large, very sharp, crystal clear image, but with lots and lots of jaggies on there. I would be very interested to kind of see what the difference between a really good RGB scar into a really good upscaler versus the retro gem would be, and I suspect maybe a good RGB scar and a good upscaler would beat the retro gem, to be honest. It is a topic I'd like to look at again in the future, maybe once I've got a 4K capture card, and if I got a decent line doubler like the 2X, or certainly a better upscaler than the one that I've got now, and then run the RGB scar through into that. I think maybe a combination of the X-Station, so you have all of the games there already, and then a decent upscaler and a decent SCART may actually be a little bit better than the retro gem. As far as faff is concerned, it's about as faffy can get. It's an awful lot of faff, to be honest. Fitting the X-Station's not too bad. You do have to lift some pins, which is a little bit awkward and a little bit nasty, but fitting the actual retro gem and soldering that directly to the GPU and to the sound chip as well, that's a real chore, and I had to have several bites at that before I got that right, to be honest. So on the faff scale, it's a big, massive, furry faff. Now let's see what Emulation has to offer, starting out with the PlayStation Classic, stock as it comes from the factory. Your interface for selecting games is this carousel affair, which is, you know, it's not great, it looks a little bit cheap, but it's infinitely nicer than the kind of DOS-looking interface that you get with the X-Station. Once you get into games, you can see that they're absolutely crystal clear and pin sharp. When put side by side with the retro gem, you can see the Classic is a little bit darker, but if anything, I would say probably the retro gem has like sharper edges, but the retro gem does have an awful lot more checkerboarding and an awful lot more dithering within the render itself. That's really obvious in the smoke and in the road texture. The PlayStation Classic also renders it at 4:3, whereas the retro gem does it at 16:9, so the retro gem possibly looks a little bit stretched out as well. Now I don't know if this checkerboarding issue is a difference that's caused by the capturing that I'm doing, because when I compared them side by side on the television, they kind of looked almost identical. Then when you compare to the original PlayStation running off disc, you can see it as a much cleaner image now. The image from the original PlayStation now looks all very grainy and awful, whereas from the PlayStation Classic you can see everything's pin sharp, you can see all of the edges are all very well defined, and there's very little noise in the image. Tekken 3 now, and as you can see from this stage, the PlayStation Classic makes a really good job of it. If you switch from the disc image into the retro gem and then onto the Classic, you can see that overall the PlayStation Classic does look better. As I've said already, how much of that is down to the shoddy recording equipment I'm using, that's up for debate, but nevertheless the PlayStation Classic does make a really good job of this.
You win.
A side-by-side of Cool Borders 2 with both the PlayStation Classic and the retro gem show very little difference whatsoever.
Kind expanded. Wow! Hey, where's your fighting spirit?
In Rayman, on the other hand, there's clearly more pixelation on the retro gem version, so that would lead me to believe there's some sort of additional smoothing going on the PlayStation Classic emulation. Overall though, both images do look really, really good. So now on to the results for the PlayStation Classic. You can pick these up pretty cheap on eBay or Facebook Marketplace for around about 50 quid, but if you want a new one, you can go to Amazon and you can pick them up there for 150 quid. There's an affiliate link in the description below if you want to help the channel out. As you've seen, the results are okay-ish. In some instances it is better than the Retro Gem, in other cases it's not quite as good, but overall it's pretty good, particularly considering it's plug and play. The only reason why this didn't get a higher result will become clear in the next section. As far as faff is concerned, this is zero faff. There is no faff whatsoever here. It is literally just plug and play and away you go. Only slight downside is that you will only have 25 games on there, and if those aren't the 25 games you want to play, there is a bit of a faff, but not a right lot, and we will cover that in the next section. As I showed in my previous video, modding the PlayStation 1 Classic is super easy, requiring nothing more than a bit of time and a USB thumb drive. By doing this, not only can you add any PlayStation 1 game that you want, you can also fix the carousel so it doesn't look quite so cheap and nasty. The most important benefit, though, is that you can install RetroArch. Now, the RetroArch installation that works with the PlayStation Classic uses the same emulator that came on the Classic. However, it comes with all the additional features that you would get if you installed it natively through RetroArch. That means not only will it now run Wipeout 2097, you can change it from looking like this to this. By boosting the render resolution that the emulator is running at, it's actually taking the original geometry and textures and then rendering them out at a much higher resolution, rather than taking an original PlayStation image, which was a much smaller render, and then kind of upscaling it. It's natively drawing that image using much more pixel data, and this leads to a huge improvement in the overall image of the game. If we go from Wipeout running from a stock PlayStation on disc with a dodgy upscaler, back to the modded PlayStation Classic, and then from the Retro Gem, and again back to the modded PlayStation Classic, you can see just how much of an improvement we can make. A side by side with Cool Borders 2 now, first with the PlayStation from disc, then the Retro Gem, and then the stock PlayStation Classic. In Rayman, there doesn't appear to be any perceivable difference between the PlayStation Classic when it's been modded and when it hasn't, although the modded one does fill up the screen a little bit better. That's probably down to the fact that this is a pixel art game rather than being a 3D render. You might notice there is some screen tearing going on the modded version of the game, but that appears to be something to do with the capturing. When I've gone back and checked it on the TV, there's no tearing issues whatsoever, so this is something to do with either OBS or the capture card. It's not all sun and roses though with the modded Classic, because as you can see here we're having some serious issues with Metal Gear Solid. It's jittering and spluttering around all over the place. When you actually get into the game it's fine, but during some of the cutscenes, which kind of make up a lot of the game, there is quite a few issues here. But as you can see, if we freeze frame this shot and compare it with all of the other options we've had so far, you can see that it is quite the step up.
Round 1. Fight!
In Tekken 3, the improvements are really subtle. They are there, but you kind of have to slow the footage right down and kind of compare them side by side, frame by frame, to even notice any of the difference. So it's not really a huge benefit that it's a game changer, but because it kind of looks good on both. And finally in this section, let's have a side-by-side of Destruction Derby of all four, just so you can see them all next to each other. On to the results for Project Eris. As before, a PlayStation Classic is going to cost you about 50 quid second hand, or maybe 150 quid if you want to buy a new one. Then on top of that, you'll need an OCJ, which is kind of a power pass-through and USB hub. You do need to use a very specific one for this to work, but there will be an affiliate link in the description below. And then yeah, any kind of cheap USB thumb drive. It generally prefers older USB 2s, but there are some USB 3s that will work, but generally, as I say, it prefers the older ones. So if you've got like an old 16 gig or a 32 gig knocking around, then it's not going to cost you anything. As far as the results go, they're pretty damn good, really, to be honest, particularly when you think that you can add any of the games that you want, and then you can also get them to render at twice the quality. I mean, to be honest, for the sake of an extra 8 quid, a USB drive, and an afternoon's worth of your time, you'd kind of be really daft not to do this to a PlayStation Classic. It completely revolutionises it and makes it look so much better. And as far as faff is concerned, it's very little faff at all, to be honest. If everything goes well, I mean, you could probably do it in about 15 minutes. So all in all, it's not a right lot of work, and it's kind of a bit of a no-brainer, really. Now, bearing in mind that the last two options were effectively emulation, if you have a snazzy PC like me, which is all full of dust and RGB, or, to be honest, even if you don't have a snazzy PC and you just have an okay PC, you can install Duckstation. Now, Duckstation comes with an amazing interface where you have all of your game covers all laid out in order, which looks absolutely amazing. Not only that, you can get it to render at 9x native, which is 4K for those non-nerds out there. And that basically turns Tekken, here on the modded PlayStation Classic, from this to this. No, I don't really know what to say about this other than like, wow, it looks like a completely different game. It's absolutely amazing. Wipeout 9027 on the Retro Gem now. And here it is on Duckstation.
Need I say more? Need I say more?
And because of the improved clarity, I've actually spotted things within games I hadn't noticed before. If you look in the background here of Battle Arena Toshinden, you can see there's a screen which is duplicating the battle. On the recording from the stock PlayStation 1, it is quite hard to make out. Here it is on the Gem, looking a little bit better. Here on the PlayStation Classic, again, it looks a little bit better, you can just about see it. And when you've modded the PlayStation Classic, it doesn't work at all. And now here on Duckstation, it's so clear, in some instances, it actually kind of gets a little bit trippy. And here's Destruction Derby from the stock PlayStation, Retro Gem, the modded PlayStation Classic, and Duckstation. Some of the differences that show up in this still from Metal Gear Solid are really quite interesting.
You keep using the word. I don't think it means what you think it means.
The stock image from the disc version has kind of very a kind of a greeny hue, and is obviously quite a noisy image in the wall behind Desk Ferret. But when you look up at the rafters, they're all very clear, and you can make them all out, and it's a relatively light image. But then when you go over to the Retro Gem, it's a lot darker, and also it's kind of got more of a bluey hue to it as well. It is still quite a noisy image, particularly when you look at his legs and around the wall behind him. Now, when you go over to the stock PlayStation Classic, a lot of that noise is gone, and some of the detail is a little bit more visible up in the rafters, but it's not particularly clear, and it kind of retains that bluish hue. And when you go over to the modded PlayStation Classic, it retains that blue hue, if not even making it slightly bluer, but obviously it's a slightly sharper image. But then when we go to Duckstation, it kind of reverts back to kind of a greeny grey colour, which is a lot closer in kind of colour and tone to the original image that came from the disc than any of the other versions, which is quite interesting really, because the Retro Gem is supposedly taking a feed directly from the GPU. Unsurprisingly, Rayman on Duckstation looks absolutely amazing, crystal clear and pin sharp with really, really vibrant colours. I think the games from increasing the native render resolution don't really have that much of an effect on the pixel art games. I think the differences between this and between the modded PlayStation Classic, and even maybe the PlayStation Classic, are pretty negligible. I think maybe if you blew them up onto a 50k screen, they might look a little bit different here and there, but overall they look pretty much the same. So I think this is more just kind of a demonstration of just how good this looks on Duckstation. On to the results for Duckstation. So as far as cost goes, Duckstation is free, and also because you're using ROMs, you can extensively get all of them for free as well. So as long as you have a PC, whether it's like an old laptop or even a spanking balling RGB full of dust thing like mine, you will probably be able to run Duckstation, and you're more likely going to be able to get it at 4K. It's not a hugely demanding piece of software, so as long as you have a PC of some sorts, chances are you will be able to play Duckstation and get all of the games you could possibly want for free. As far as results are concerned, I guess they kind of speak for themselves. They're absolutely amazeballs. Duckstation makes PlayStation 1 games look absolutely amazing. The quality of the emulation is fantastic. They run really good as well. There's no major artifacting that I found on any of the games I've tested or any that I've played in my own time. So yeah, the results are absolutely amazeballs with Duckstation. And as far as faff is concerned, there's no faff whatsoever. It's literally a really straightforward download. I mean, you've got the faff of getting the games, but obviously you would have that whether you were using the PlayStation Classic, Project Eris, or even if you were using the standard PlayStation or the Retro Gem, but you were using an X-Station. You still need to have all of the ROMs, so, you know, it kind of cancels itself out. So there's a little bit, a tiny bit of faff there of getting the games, but not a huge amount. It's fairly easy and straightforward. Importing them into Duckstation again is very, very easy. You just have to point it to the directory where it is. And getting all of the covers, again, I believe that was a copy and paste affair. I just had to Google a link, copy and paste it into Duckstation, hit OK, and then just left it. And it filled in all of the cover art as well. So it's, as far as faff goes, it's the least faffy of all the faffs you have ever faffed before.
So there you go. That's my kind of 2 penneth into the argument. To be honest, I think in 2025, with emulation the way that it is now, I don't see any real... I mean, unless you're a real purist, I would recommend people just go down the emulation route, to be honest. I do every so often, like hook the PlayStation up to the CRT telly and play it from the disc, but it's always a bit sketchy. When it works, it looks amazing, but there's always that possibility that it's not going to work. And, you know, modding the PlayStation 1, as I have done, was great. It looks amazing, as you've seen. You get really good results from it, but it's a lot of work and it's quite difficult, and maybe you have to pay someone to do it, and it's quite expensive. You don't need a PC anywhere near as powerful as the one that I've got to be able to get just the same results with Duckstation that I was getting. So, like, I think nowadays, honestly, it's a toss-up. If you've got a PC, even a half reasonable PC, emulation on Duckstation is probably your best bet. And if you don't, you could pick one of these up for dirt cheap. And, you know, like I say, in my previous video, modding them, it's not particularly difficult. Or even if you just use a mini PC and just get an emulator on there, honestly, I think it's the way to go nowadays. I would find it very difficult to recommend to somebody that they should, if they were going to start, if they really wanted to play PlayStation games, they should go out and buy an original PlayStation and either hook it up to a TV or through an upscaler and buy the games and do all that kind of stuff from a second-hand shop. It's just, I think it's just, emulation's the way now. Emulation's the way with PlayStation 1. But anyway, that's just my take on it. You might have a different opinion, and if that's the case, feel free to head down there into the comments and tell me why I'm a stupid monkey and why your idea is better than mine. And that's fine. And while you're down there, hit the like button and subscribe. You'll also find down there affiliate links to Amazon where you can pick up a PlayStation Classic along with the OTG adapter that I use to get all of the games onto the PlayStation 1 Classic. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I will see you all again on the flip side. Thank you very much. Come to my streams. I have memberships. Do all of those kind of cool things. And thank you very much. I'll see you all later. Cheerio.
Before we go, I'd just like to say a very special thank you to our Frostbite members, which is Spaghetti Lassetti Rossetti Belletti, Blue Nookies, Pipsqueak, Emo Jamo, and Vinny98 NYC. So thank you very much, guys, for supporting the channel, and thank you very much to the Frostbite members as well, McDazzy and Jordansten. Thank you all so much. It really does mean the world to me, and thank you very much. I will keep pumping them out if you guys keep turning up and watching. And thank you for your extra support, guys. Take it easy. I'll see you all very soon. Bye-bye.